Good morning, everyone! On this blessed morning, I am going to use up my remaining large chunk of olive wood. One should never discard olive wood, no matter how untreatable. So here I am. First step was to cut the cracked, useless piece off, and that's what you see us do here. My daughter took the useful piece, video for which has already been released a while back, and I took a much more difficult piece. Once I got the piece, I started slowly planing it. Firstly, this piece was a little warped, so for beginning I started off by trying to get bottom as plain as possible. Shoved a few wedges into the top part to keep the whole thing steady and not rocking, and started off planing. To make things even harder, there was a relatively large crack on the bottom of it, so I had to move the planer down slowly to not make things worse. Once the bottom part was smooth and plain, handling the top was a piece of cake. Just gave it a few rounds until everything was perfect. My daughter was really happy to help too. Kids are actually quite amazing helpers, and it is worth it. Once the piece's general shape was ready, it was time to fix all those cracks. As the first step, I gave everything a good sanding around the cracks, since the planer didn't fix the wood around there. When that was done, the next step was to take some glue, fill the cracks up with the glue, then take a really useless piece of olive wood, and I mean something absolutely unsalvageable, and salvage it by turning it into a paste for the cracks. So I used my Dremel and very finely sanded some sawdust into the glue. This in turn turned everything into a paste which I forcefully massaged into the cracks. When doing this, you want to make sure not to leave any paste seep out of the crack. Massage just enough to get it into the crack and remove the rest. If you leave excess on, then sanding it off might expose the crack again. Once everything has dried for over 2 days, I took a sander with 80 grit sandpaper and sanded all the imperfections off. I made sure to occasionally run my finger through where the cracks existed to make sure that everything was sanded smoothly. And when the cracks have been sufficiently cleaned, I just proceeded working with 80 grit and giving the piece some shape. First order of priority was to make sure that there are no sharp edges. I like to make sure all my pieces have smooth rounded corners. I also tried making sure that the middle groove was properly sanded. But sadly enough, I believe I still do not possess sufficient enough skill with the sander to make it happen. But I continued and kept at it, slowly sanding top and bottom and then the sides, starting from 80 grit all the way to 800 grit until it became slippery in my grip. And now it was time for my favorite part, oiling! I can never get enough of watching olive wood get drenched in oil. The color, the hues, the liveliness of it all. I let this piece drink its fair share of oil. It actually drank a lot. I applied a total of 3 coats per side, let it drink up for 8 hours between each coat application, wiped thoroughly, and just kept letting it drink and drink. And I mean, just look at it. If you just rewind back a bit and see the sheer color difference, this thing looks absolutely fancy now. So time to seal it all up and apply some wax. I set the sander speed to the high setting and then very slowly moved the buffing pad to let the friction melt the wax and bond with the surface. And that's it. The piece was ready. Just look at it. I love it. Do let me know your thoughts on this, please. There are still, of course, a couple of things I would improve on. First of all, if I could, due to such a sheer variety of color variation for olive wood, in the future I would use differently colored sawdust for different sections. There is a section in the middle of the edge where the color difference between the crack and the wood is just too noticeable. Also, I would try to put more thought into how to properly sand the groove in the middle. I wanted to, but it simply isn't to the standard that I have come to expect out of my creations. But then I couldn't figure out a better way to do it. Not to mention those imperfections only showed up after I oiled it. Before oiling, it actually looked pretty decent. Still, overall, I did like it. If you did enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing. I release a video every week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. And also don't forget, if you have any comments or questions, those are very welcome too. Bye bye!